Pacers, Cavs tonight. Somehow, we are over actually. A third of the way into the season, and two division rivals haven't squared off yet. What's going on in Cleveland with the Donovan Mitchell experience? The Pacers are surging. This game could be super fun as the Caris LeVert, Ricky Rubio connections run deep for these franchises. We'll cover the two teams and that trade again today on both Locked On Pacers and Locked On Cavs. Let's go.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Welcome in, everybody, to a crossover edition here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Locked On Pacers and Locked On Cavs, two division rivals, you could say, that play tonight for the first time this season. I'm Tony East, the host of Locked On Pacers, and he is...
I'm Chris Manning, host of Locked On Cavs, one of the hosts at the very least. Tony, it's good to see you. It's good to talk. It's good to again, we're going to again revisit the Caris LeVert trade, which I feel like we've talked about a lot, but like it just is the gift that keeps on giving for us.
It's very interesting that the farther away that trade gets, the more interesting it gets, just because of the still outgoing dynamic of it from the Cavs' perspective. They still have a floating first out there. It almost got even bigger with none other than Ricky Rubio somehow getting involved, going both directions and back to Cleveland. So lots of fun stuff to talk about there. But of course, we have to talk about the game. The basketball game that will be played between the two teams that the Pacers are definitely surprising, but this is my loaded question to start. Cavs third in the East, Chris, they look great. Would you also say that they have been surprising this year, or is this kind of where you thought they would be?
I think it's mostly where I thought they would be. I think there are things that I feel like I'm a little surprised about. I think for one, I think I'm a little, maybe just because I didn't watch the Jazz enough, sorry David Locke, but I think Donovan Mitchell's played at like an All-NBA level, and he hasn't made an All-NBA team before, and he's played at just like an insane level. I mean, you go back to his last game, the game against the Mavs, he was unreal in the first half, was pretty good down the stretch to kind of help ice that game for Cleveland. And he's really competed on defense, which was like the big thing about how is this going to work, considering how bad defensively he was. So I'm not surprised. I think there are things about it that are surprising. And there's like, I think still some limitations with this team. Like I think they are a step behind the Bostons and the Milwaukees of the world. No shame in that. Those two teams are amazing. But I'm not really surprised. So, Tony, are you surprised? As someone who like looked at this from afar and said, okay, the Cavs went all in on Donovan Mitchell. Are you surprised that they are 18-11? I believe a top 10 defense and offense at this current moment. I'll check that. But all right, where do you just stand on what you think of this Cavs team has been?
Yeah, it's easy to say this now, obviously, but I'm not either. But the reason I'm not is because I always thought the projections for that team were really odd, because even if you look at the Cavs before the season, they get Donovan Mitchell, they make the big move, if, they might lose some defense there. Okay. Well, they won 44 games last year, and they obviously got better in the trade. And a lot of the predictions were like, they're going to be 6th or 7th in the East. I'm like, is the East going to have like 750-win teams? I thought they would be he's worth 5 wins, right? At least. So I thought they would be pretty good. Maybe they're at like the smallest smidge above what I expected, but not so much. I mean, I thought it was pretty obvious to me that they'd be good, not only because they got Donovan Mitchell, but because their 3 best players last year were like 22, 21, and 25, right? They're going to get better. They're young. So it made sense that the Cavs would be good to me, but people still continued to be kind of been like, oh, the spunky, surprising Cavs. I'm like, I guess, but these guys, they did 2 All-Stars last year. I don't know. Maybe.
No, I don't think you are. And it's like, I think there are still people, if you've watched them, I think if you see them, and I think the last couple weeks are maybe the best example of this, there is still stuff being figured out. They've had some injuries that have kind of taken key rotation pieces out of this team. I think one of the big weaknesses of this team, as we understand it, is the depth. I don't think that depth is quite where we'd want it to be. The offense in the last 2 weeks is 27th in the league according to the Clean of the Glass, so it's not optimal. That's dicey considering who you have on your team and all of that. I think Garland and Mitchell are still learning how to play together. I think you're still missing some kind of connectivity fully between this team, but on the year, they're 4th in net rating. They're even over the last couple weeks when they've had kind of a bad offensive run, they're still 7th in the league in point differential. So like they're fine mostly, even with some bad offensive stuff. What is interesting, Tony, I think, is that like I'm curious. The Pacers are kind of an interesting team for them to play against, just because they're stylistically, I think, a little bit different. And I'm curious to see how they approach defending Tyrese Haliburton. You know, I think Haliburton has obviously been fantastic. I have like less concerns about how they're going to defend like a Miles Turner or some of the other pieces they might have, but like this is a big guard. The Cavs, I think a lot of you can tell me this is wrong. I feel like teams will throw like a wing or a bigger guard at Haliburton, and the Cavs like don't exactly have an option. You love doing that. Like, are you going to throw Lamar Stevens on him? Are you going to start Isaac Okoro and risk the spacing concerns to defend him? Maybe. I could talk myself into that as someone who still lives on Okoro Island. But like, do you want Donovan Mitchell to have to defend him the whole game? Maybe not. It's not really a thing you want Garland to do either. That is, for me, like from a basketball perspective, the most interesting part of how this maybe gets approached.
Interesting game, and part of the reason I've kind of tracked the Cavs maybe more closely than I should this year is, the Pacers right now, their best 4 players, not their best 4 players, but their best 4 positions are 1, 2, 4, and 5, right? They have really good guards and really good bigs and no wings. And that's the Cavs, like part of the pessimism with them was that, right? They are no wing team. Not none, but you know what I'm saying. Like no,
I mean, it's not none.
Like, yeah, well, the Pacers are like Aaron Nesmith, Chris Duarte in that position, right? Like it's similar to the Cavs situation. And so I've been interested to see how the Cavs, in a league where wings are the thing, are really succeeding without them. And so the Pacers have the same, I wouldn't call it a problem, right? Again, both these teams are doing well, but hurdle, I guess, is the best way to put it. And so when they do play teams with wings, yes, sometimes they do end up on Tyrese Haliburton, especially because Andrew Nembhard's been very surprising and good for a second-round pick as a rookie, but like he's not this huge off-the-dribble threat you have to throw someone on. And he starts at the 3, Aaron Nesmith's at the 4, same exact conundrum. Like you can get away with putting your best defenders on Haliburton or even Hield if he's handling the ball, put your big on Turner. Great, you solved it all. Like it's not that complicated or confusing to do something like that. And so I think the Cavs, even if in the absence of wings, the guys that they would in theory go with, Stevens, Okoro, I think the LeVert experiment starting is probably done, but maybe him.
Yes.
They would end up on Haliburton, whoever it happens to be. That it doesn't happen. Like the trouble for the Pacers is they try to run even on like makes or like out of bounds turnovers. They'll try to run into the stands and go fast, so teams can't set. So it ends up that you guard your position a lot just naturally. But when you can really think about it and set, teams trying to cross match against the Pacers, and I think that'll be a big swing in this game. Is can the Cavs find somebody who can actually slow Tyrese Haliburton down? The Heat are the only team that figured it out this year. But that was only 4 days ago. So there is a fresh blueprint on how to do it.
The thing I would expect maybe Cleveland to do, and I'd be curious to see what you have to say about how teams have done this and maybe what the Heat did, is I think when they can, they will probably try to switch their bigs. Now, they have 2 bigs who are like absurdly good at switching onto guards. And obviously that's not going to work every time. Sometimes a guard, like someone like Haliburton, is going to get by the big, get to the rim, maybe draw a foul, maybe find a look elsewhere after the switch. But those 2 guys, like if you're going to do that, you feel pretty good about that. Like you feel pretty good about that now. Like the question is, like the Cavs are a team that play very slow. Like they don't play at a really, like they're not interested in always running up the floor and playing at this really high octane pace. If the Pacers maybe control the tempo of this game, does that kind of keep the Cavs from getting in their half-court defensive set, kind of dragging the pace down to their speed? And then, like, do the Pacers maybe just kind of eschew running a lot of ball screens and things to just kind of prevent the switching and do some of that? And maybe this is a zone game for the Cavs. Like, we have not seen this year there's something that worked really well last year, which is the Evan Mobley at the top of the key zone, and he just eats up space. And like, but maybe you see that, and you say, okay, try to drive past this guy and shoot threes. We can live with that outcome. It's a look I'm waiting to see when and if they dust it off. Maybe this is the night. Maybe it's probably not, considering it's like a road game it's in Cleveland, but they're coming off of a little road trip and all of that. Like it's interesting, but that is where my brain goes. To me, this game is really just like I'm excited to watch Haliburton, and I'm excited to see how the Cavs kind of deal with these defensive things, because like you're right, they don't have wings, but they have a defense that has been so good and has risen to a lot of challenges this year, despite not kind of having like that lockdown perimeter guy you kind of expect a really good defense to have.
Yeah, the Heat Haliburton plan, per guys talking about it and watching, was Bam being amazing, right, on the switch. Like, and the Cavs can actually replicate that. They're one of the few teams that can. And so big guys setting a ball screen. I could not get big guy and ball screen out of my mouth, and that's a terrible one to almost have a Freudian slip for. But anywho, the switch just ate him up. He couldn't do anything. So they went to Andrew Nembhard on the ball more in the second half of that game because Haliburton was shut down, right? 1 point, didn't make a single shot. And the other thing they did really well is when they would shoot, they would only send one guy to rebound. They'd send 4 guys back. And Haliburton's really good in transition, right? He sees the floor really well. He pushes. He's fast. There's no transition when there's 4 guys waiting for you on defense. So that worked really well for the Heat, and I think it's something other teams might try to do, although the Pacers are also terrible on the defensive glass. So it's what battle do you want to try to win and fight? But, I told you before that we started recording, I was going to unearth my Cavs take. I don't know where you sit on this, but I think Evan Mobley is the most underrated player in the league. Right.
Wow. Okay.
He is incredibly good. If we did a 2021 redraft, I'm picking him number 1 right now. And he's going to swallow Haliburton up if they do switching with him, but he kind of guards forward sometimes. I'm not sure how they're going to be able to use him, but I think if I'm the Cavs, I'm putting Mobley on the screener, which will be Turner most likely, as much as possible. Maybe the Pacers reinsert Jalen Smith into the starting 5 to have 2 bigs out there to mix up the screens, but there's no good option because Jarrett Allen's a beast too. So the Cavs are set up kind of well to slow him down. Can they also slow down Buddy Hield and other guys who are out there?
Yeah, I am curious to see just kind of how they match up from the get-go and what that kind of looks like. Tony, I want to respond to that Mobley take, but I think we have to do a quick ad read first.
I also think we have to do that. We should start by sharing a message from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. Few becomes a few too many as the evening comes to an end and people start to head out. You think of calling for a ride? Nah, you live nearby. You can make it home okay. No big deal. What are the odds you get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead and get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life. Or even worse, maybe someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. Also, let me talk to you guys about the lovely people over at PrizePicks. Tonight, you could take, for example, Luka Doncic to score more or less than 30.5 points, LeBron to have more or less than 8.5 rebounds, Kevin Durant more or less than 6.5 assists. Steph Curry is also in this ad read. He's not going to play. But either way, that is the idea behind PrizePicks. You pick a player, you pick a stat, over or under. Will the player exceed or go below that projection? You can pick 2 to 6 players. You can pick a ton of different stats, and if you win, you can win up to 25 times your money on your entry. And the best part about it, to me, you're not going against other people who can do more research than you and beat you. It's just you versus their projections, so there's no unfair advantages out there. They have any sport you watch, including NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, and college. You can make your entries in a minute or less. It's super easy. It's safe with fast withdrawals and operational in over 30 states plus Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, they'll give you $100. You deposit $50, they'll give you $50. You get the idea. Don't forget, enter the promo code LOCKEDON for an instant deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy made easy. Thanks for making Locked On Pacers or Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every single day, wherever you happen to be started. For your second listen, hop on over to Locked On Sports Today. Go beyond the scoreboard, behind the scenes for the biggest stories in sports with our local hosts here at the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by Peter Burkowski, available on Odyssey, YouTube, wherever you get podcasts. Chris, Evan Mobley take. Hit me. Am I stupid? Am I overdoing it? Because I just think he's incredible.
No, I think I think the rankings discourse of top 100 lists, I always find those very not worth my time. But I did honestly have a little confusion. I was the Nick Young confused meme when I saw that Franz Wagner was ahead of him in the Ringer's top 100 the other day. And I think Franz Wagner's awesome. I'm going to fact check myself to make sure I didn't hallucinate this, to be honest with you. But I just do not understand. He's number 1 in that class. You're still seeing him grow in real time. He's in year 2. You are figuring out kind of what he's going to be fully. He's growing into being a rim protector. We're seeing his offensive game grow. All of these things. he is on the way to being, like, I think the best guy in that class and one of the very best players in the league. It wouldn't surprise me in a couple of years if, like, the Cavs are his team to some degree. Like, he's that good. Sorry, I want to apologize. Evan Mobley's 43 and Franz Wagner is much lower. So I want to apologize to the good folks of the Ringer that I just hallucinated that and my brain's destroyed. But he's 43 on that list. I think he's going to be a guy who could be like a top 10 player in this league. I think he's the best guy in that class. I think he should have won Rookie of the Year. I think you're still seeing him kind of grow into that role. Like Jarrett Allen is really, really important. I think honestly, in some ways, Jarrett Allen is the better defensive player of the year, all defensive candidate right now, because he's been really good and really important to a lot of the different things they need him to do as a shot blocker and kind of a rim deterrent. But I don't think you're wrong. And I think Mobley's one of those guys that his box score stuff is not going to blow you away. Like, I don't know if he's ever going to be like a 25-7 and like 6 guy or something like that, right? But I think you're going to, if you watch and you see what he does in terms of rotations and altering shots and steals and all these things, I think he's going to be just like a repeat all-star, repeat all-defense guy. He's a truly, truly special talent. He's the kind of guy that like you should lose a lot of games to get.
If you can read the game the way he does on defense, like, you're allowed to be good at offense eventually. And he's good at offense now, but like really good at offense eventually. That's what I think about that stuff. It's happened to a lot of guys in the past. I think he's going to be so good. I love watching him play. And I think he's a matchup disaster for the Pacers. Speaking of matchup disasters, though, a lot of reason that people were low on the Cavs is their backcourt defense. Darius Garland's kind of tiny, despite being very good. Donovan Mitchell, for his position also, not the tallest guy ever at that 2-guard spot. Tyrese Haliburton's been great this year. Buddy Hield has had, I don't know what to call it. He's had more ups than downs, so calling it an up-and-down year is not fair. And at his best, he's been very good, but he has a few, like, oh, okay, kind of games, but mostly good. Benedict Mathurin, obviously, top 2 Rookie of the Year guy, wherever you feel on Banchero right now. They've got the guards to punish bad defense in the backcourt. Have the Cavs been better defensively there? Is that where the Pacers can get their advantage? Where can the Pacers get their advantage if those guys are better? Because if not, it's going to be really hard for them to score.
I think that is a place they can't get their advantage. Like, if you are going to find one, I think, like, you saw the Spurs the other night have some success, like, moving a lot, playing with pace, really throwing weird stuff the Cavs' way. Like, that was certainly a thing that threw Cleveland some wrinkles. And I think to Mitchell and Garland's credit, like, they both battle, they both play with effort. I think Mitchell has been, like, a much better defender than I would have suspected. Like, he's truly trying and like using his wingspan and all these things in a way that I don't think he was at the tail end of that Utah thing. Like, everyone who watched the playoffs last year came away thinking this guy's like a disaster on defense, and he's not been a disaster on defense. I'm not going to tell you he's been good, right? But like he's been better than I would have thought. I think getting them out in transition and how they use Miles Turner, a guy Pacers people are very familiar with, Sabonis. Domantas Sabonis had some really interesting looks with the Cavs, just creating stuff out of being a big and using and kind of being the hub for certain things. That created some problems for the Cavs. The 2 times they played Sacramento already this year, so that's kind of a thing you could maybe see as well. But I mean, if Haliburton pushes and gets ahead, and they don't switch or whatever it is, or Kevin Love, if he has like a night where he's not making the rotations with effort that you need him to, like, that presents some problems as well. But Tony, on the other end, I want to ask you this: how will the Pacers, how have their guys held up against bigs in terms of defensive? Like, Miles Turner, obviously a very, very good player, but how are the guys that are Miles Turner playing in the front court? And I'm thinking back to Evan Mobley and how they'll throw him some post ups against guys that are smaller than him. And if he's being guarded in the post by, like, let's say Buddy Hield happens or Nesmith or Jalen or whoever it is. How does that look from a defensive perspective for Indiana?
Yeah, that's where the Pacers get in trouble sometimes switching, because they like size switch a lot. They even go beyond that at times. But like, they just played the Wizards, and there were probably 10 possessions that ended with Kristaps Porzingis shooting over Buddy Hield, like from 10 feet and in. Just like, you can't do that. And they won. They won handily too. It's not like it was like killing them, but that was pretty easy looks for the Wizards. Like, it's not that teams don't post up that much anymore, that, but like, you don't see a ton of post defense from this Pacers team. But on bigs like that, they don't really have a lot of good options. Like, that's definitely Miles Turner's weakest point defensively, because they switch, they get a lot of shorter guys there. And now that they haven't for the last 2 games, maybe they'll go back to it for matchups in this game. But Aaron Nesmith started at the 4 the last 2 games. He's 6'5", right? Like, that is drastically shorter than whoever the Cavs had started the 4.
Evan Mobley.
So I think that is a big area for the Cavs to have a hub-style successful offense. I think Jarrett Allen especially could feast in that way if they switch ball screens up high. I don't know that they'll do that, but given the way that they've played, that could be an option. I'm curious how that's going to go because it's not something they've been good at, and it's mostly just, Shea Brissett is a wing-sized forward, and all the rest of the guys they play are either clearly a big or clearly a guard. Maybe you could kind of call them Nesmith and Duarte wings, but Duarte's not going to be with the team, so it's going to be hard for them to find matchups to slow that kind of stuff down.
Tony, I want to ask you one more thing before we go into our second and final ad break. The Pacers, I believe, now are 7th in the East right now, so in the play-in tournament. But with how compact the standings are, they're in the playoff hunt, and as you said, we're like pretty deep into the season at this point. Do you think that's real?
You have to kind of think it's real at this far in, just because it's been so many games and I don't know where people fall in Miami. They're under 500, but they beat Miami. They beat New Orleans, right? They've beaten some good teams along the way. Again, I don't know where people fall in Toronto at this stage. They beat Toronto. They beat Brooklyn twice. Lakers, Warriors. They've beaten good teams, right? It's not like they definitely have had an easier schedule, especially in the middle of November, but they've beaten good enough teams for me to go, yeah, I mean, they're obviously better than people thought, and I think this is probably closer to a 35-40 win team than the 25 win projection that they had. So I'd say it's real-ish. They've had a favorable schedule in terms of opponents, but that's not their fault. And they've beaten good teams in both conferences along the way. So I think that we'll see how trade season goes, but I'm guessing they haven't played any of the top 3 teams in the East yet, right? This Cavs game is the very first time they're doing that. They haven't played, Denver or Phoenix or a bunch of the top teams out west either. So I think that they will probably settle in where I said 35, low 30s wins. Maybe that gets them 10 in the East just because of how the East is this year, but I don't think they're going to be in the hunting for a series versus play-in position when the season ends.
Yeah, that makes sense, and it's interesting again. They maybe not on purpose fully, just based on what the roster is and everything. But this is a team that's not gonna go the full teardown route. They're not really in the Wemby sweepstakes. As I kind of thought they might end up just based on what the roster ended up being. But that's just kind of an interesting
Mathurin's
quirk.
Been so good that they have good ball handling all the time.
I love him.
Yeah, I can't explain it. Just saying he's fearless or he gets it, I feel just sells him short.
You know that meme of there'll be an X-ray of someone's chest and there's a dog and there's that is him. That is him in a human form. He has that in him. He's awesome. I love him.
Yeah, people talk about he's fearless with contact. It's I don't even think it's that. He just wants to go through the guy.
Yeah.
But beyond him being good, the other thing I think that's in their play in favor, which is not anything they did actually, it's just that Chicago, Toronto, and Miami all just kind of stink compared to what people thought. They're not bad, but especially if Chicago blows it up, it's gonna be hard to get out of the play-in. The Wizards aren't any good, so they might just play their season and be there, and when it's over.
Yeah, that's dead on. Okay, let's go into one more break, but got to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline, which, everyone here at Locked On knows BetOnline. Tony, throw that graphic up for me. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college, to the upcoming college bowls, to basketball and the World Cup final on Sunday. They've got it all at BetOnline.net. Tony, do you have Argentina or France?
It's hard to go against the reigning champs and Mbappe right now, so I got to go with France.
All right, well, I don't like you anymore. Argentina for life. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. They've always got the fastest and easy ways to get your betting info. For instance, they already have a lineup for Cavs Pacers. The Cavs are 7.5-point favorites, which seems a little high, maybe. Over-under for that game in terms of combined point total is at 224. Remember, that's a Friday night tip-off in Cleveland if that's the game you are tracking. Head to their website today or use your mobile device to learn more. They have everything over there. Remember, that's BetOnline. That's where the game starts.
Thanks again for making Locked On Pacers and Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every single day. Check out Locked On NBA Game to Game next. Best way to learn about the night that was in the league. I listen to it every morning the day after the Pacers play, because I can learn about the rest of the games I didn't have time to watch while the Pacers are playing. You get all the 1-minute scoops about the action from, once again, the local hosts here at the Locked On Podcast Network. I absolutely love the way that show is structured. Chris, we're revisiting a trade and a guy getting traded and then immediately going back to his old team, and some picks are moving around. And here we are, 8 months later. Caris LeVert and Ricky Rubio are both Cavaliers. The Pacers have the Cavs lottery-protected pick this year. Assuming no catastrophic injuries, that looks like it's going to be 24, 25-ish. So the Pacers effectively, for Caris LeVert, got 25 and Drew Nembhard. Let's talk about that trade. Chris, how are you feeling about the way LeVert has fit into this Cavs team? And it's different now because they have Donovan Mitchell. They didn't when they made the trade. But where are you standing on it now?
I think if the Cavs could go back and redo it today, and that's obviously just not how this works, but if we're doing this exercise, I wonder if they would decide it wasn't worth it. Caris LeVert, I don't think is like a bad player, but there's a couple of things and they obviously didn't have Donovan Mitchell at the time, and that changes. I think it's changed the calculus of what he is. His role is very different on a team that has Garland and Mitchell, and not just Garland. But he has not proven to be able to play the three. So, like, you can't play all three of them together. It just hasn't worked. Like, they just don't hold up with him at the three, and that's saying something when you have Allen and Mobley. He's not making mid-range shots this year, which is, like, half of his thing. It's, like, a big part of his identity as a scorer is just mid-range shots. He's not making them this year. He's not, he's shooting catch-and-shoot threes this year at a better clip than you might expect. But, like, is that going to hold? It doesn't feel like he's really stretching the floor. And just from, like, an asset perspective, Tony, you're probably trading maybe you still have to trade Ochai Agbaji last year anyway. But if you just look at where the Cavs are headed, they have these four core guys very much kind of locked in. And I think the rest of the roster is in flux, and they need wings. They need to find wings. I think like they had a game against San Antonio where it just made me think every UDFA, every second round pick, that every other year first round picks they'll have going forward, that those have to be used on wings. Like there's not a need for another big or another point guard. Like go find those other places, but like throw all your development chips in and on wings. I think like it would benefit this team a lot to have a chance to throw looks at that, and then you could have maybe thrown the ML, like you use part of your Emily and Ricky Rubio. Maybe there's a minimum guy you could have found that could have just eaten up some of what he does. Maybe you just like have another wing that you found on the cheap that just fills in. Maybe you make another trade for like a budget wing. I just think like that first round pick and the cost of it and the getting the chance to develop, it just hasn't worked out. And I think the trade they made for LeVert at the time, and I know for a fact that you and I talked about this when we did a show and we texted about it. That was a win-now trade to maximize last season. I understand trying to ride last season and maximize it. I get it. But I think ultimately, like that trade, it looks kind of short-sighted now. And like, look, I think LeVert, if he was making $9 million instead of 18, this might be a slightly different conversation. But he's like this glaring weird piece on this team. He doesn't quite fit perfectly. If you're looking at the Cavs making a trade this season, he's one of the logical guys. They might try to use his salary to flip him for something else. That's where it is at with him. And I wonder if they might just want to, if they could get a mulligan on that one. I kind of think they would probably say, yeah, I would take a mulligan on this.
It's interesting in hindsight because of the Mitchell element to me. Like, I think I know the answer to this, but just to confirm, like, there's enough stuff the Cavs could have done outside of what they actually did to get Donovan Mitchell without Agbaji, right?
Probably. I think
because that's
probably.
One part of it. Like they got to keep that pick in the end, which now that they have Mitchell is like kind of good, I guess.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you keep that pick, and like, look, also like I wonder if it's Abaji's not like playing for the Jazz. He just played in the G League the other night, so it's not like they drafted he was marketed as this like kind of win now piece. He's not like that's really hard for a rookie to do. Maybe like. And maybe the medicals for them were just too much, but like I wonder if it looks different if they get AJ Griffin, who's looked pretty good for Atlanta. Like and that's the piece they get, and then they trade next year's first. Or even if they have a first in this upcoming draft and they give you trade flexibility on draft night. They would have like a little more flexibility without having done this. And look, I honestly I have a hard time gauging trade prices for stuff right now. Like with how much Mitchell went for, how much DeJounte Murray went for. You could I was surprised like Bojan Bogdanovic went for like a second when LeVert went for first when I think Bogdanovic is like a much more of like a contributing to winning basketball player, and he went for like much less, and that was weird to me. I wonder even if this was like 2 seconds and it's just like a salaried up for Indiana to some degree, and like if it feels different. It's just like I think the Pacers like clearly are gonna feel better about that trade, even if all they get is Nembhard and like a developmental swing in the 20s next year. Like that's not a bad outcome for a guy that that wouldn't have fit with Haliburton, that wouldn't have fit with what's going on under Carlisle now.
He didn't fit with Carlisle last year.
Yeah, exactly.
You said something funny about LeVert, like he's not fitting at the 3. Like the Pacers were like, oh, you're probably better as a 1 than a 2. Like that's how far away from 3 they had him when he was playing here. And yeah, from the guys of what you said of would the Cavs undo it? Like, oh my God, the Pacers would do that trade 100 times. Like in their position of heading through a rebuild, needing wings, like LeVert for Nembhard alone, they might say yes to, given what we know now. Like,
even just the cost.
Right.
Nembhard is on like a cheap rookie contract.
Yeah,
it's like
great deal, 3 years, like very cheap, and they also get this first. Like, oh yeah, I think they do that every single time. Eating Rubio for half a year was totally worth that to them, and I think that's an interesting part of it as well. The Pacers had to do that deal at the time. I think the other factor for the Cavs, obviously, it looks not as good for them now, is I don't think they thought when they did it that they'd deal with the injuries they had last March. I think they thought for sure they were going to make the playoffs with him.
Yeah.
Now it would have made it look much better to have, like, his skill set is better in the playoffs, even though it's not like awesome, but it's better in that kind of situation. The game is slowed down and you sometimes need mid-range shots and things like that. Like, he was awesome for the Nets in the bubble playoffs, if you remember that far back. That was his last postseason team. So, yeah, I think, like, given where the Pacers were, great trade. It made a ton of sense for them to do it. Also hilarious that it happened while they were literally in the building, like in the queue for the deal to go down. But yeah, the fact that they nailed pick 31 and have this outstanding pick that who knows what they'll do with it. They can't really fit. They have 3 firsts next year. They can't even fit that many guys on their team. So who knows where it ends up. But
yeah,
they have to be very happy with how it ended up in the direction of their team, because especially now that they probably knew that the Haliburton offer existed. It's not like those trades happen in like 2 seconds, but the fact that they were able to pivot to the guards that they have now and do that worked out so well for them.
Yeah, and I just think as we're going into whatever is coming in the NBA right now, and like this is to me like separate from whatever happens with the CBA and whatever happens with the money stuff. I think the teams that are like going to be really well positioned are going to be like the teams that have. Not that you aren't going to be successful. Like, I think the Cavs are going to be good for several years. But I think there's something really nice if you're in Indiana and you have like just a couple extra assets to flip around and do so with. Obviously, like there are teams with treasure troves of picks. Like Sam Presti is like Scrooge McDuck, like swirling around in his picks. David Griffin has a ton of picks in New Orleans. But like these teams that just give themselves like flexibility. And the Cavs large part, like they kind of like you trade for Donovan Mitchell. That's like your that's your move. Like you can make other trades, but like going forward, like you're not going to be a cap space team. You're going to have the MLE. You're going to have minimums. You're going to have like your developmental pieces and your rookie scale contracts. And like you took one, like even if you didn't know you were getting Mitchell in February, and you didn't like you couldn't have there's no way they knew then. Even if you had your all at eye on that kind of big trade. I think they just like went it feels like now they went too fast on that trade, and I wonder if like they do it again. They got Rubio back, and I know they love that and all that stuff, but like it's like they rushed it a little bit with that trade. Or like, and again, like if it was 2 seconds, I would feel much differently about it than it's the first for me that is really just like, okay, like you swung a little too fast on that one in retrospect.
It's just kind of early, right? And whenever there's these earlier in the build trades like that, the Cavs hadn't made the playoffs yet with this core. Like, I thought Minnesota did it maybe right on time, maybe a little early for them, but I'm going to use them as a comparison. Every time there's a trade like this one's much smaller than the Gobert trade. It's like, not only is your bet on the player you traded for, in the case of Mitchell and LeVert, it's also a bet on your remaining young guys that could be trade pieces or good to be better. And like Okoro, for example, is like can he step up? Garland, all these guys, and they have. But that's the second part of the bet is you already believe in your young guys. Minnesota's like gave up all this stuff because they're like, great, we have Anthony Edwards, like he's our young beast. Cat's on our team, like that. That I always think is the secondary part of these trades. And so the Cavs are making a bet on their young guys at the same time, and that could make it work out just fine. That they went too early, but it might make it awkward in the interim, kind of before that ascent is complete, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, there's still tinkering to do, and I think the tinkering's just like a little bit harder now.
Right.
And
yes.
like even at the time, it's like I don't know what would have happened with Colin Sexton in a non-Donovan Mitchell trade world. He obviously was just like sitting out there in RFA purgatory for a long time. Like, would a team of LeVert, Sexton, and Garland made any more sense than Mitchell, Garland, and LeVert? Like, I would argue probably no. Like, I think you still have these same kind of questions with LeVert. And I don't know. Like, does he make sense to resign? Is he hits like? There's just like a lot. I just still have like a lot of questions about like about the fit. And that's like he's fine enough to talk to you in the media session. Like he's overall, like for the year, he's a net positive on the court. He's a negative when he plays the three, and they're kind of getting away from those lineups. It's just like, if we're nitpicking, I think the flexibility thing is just like where I come just a little. Good job on Indiana for getting that trade done though. Like, good for them for pulling that one off.
They've had a few, the Pacers and the Kevin Pritchard era, like occasionally stinky deals. Tyreek Evans, TJ Leaf. No one really overpaid necessarily. Their drafting hasn't been great till recently, but they are good at trades.
I mean, they got Haliburton in itself, and it's like that is such a win for them. And even like the Sacramento side of it, if their thing was like, hey, we want to like make our team make sense and like get to the playoffs, that's the whole goal of the Sabonis trade. Like, even like that logic makes sense. Even if like in retrospect, like maybe they shouldn't have traded Haliburton, and like maybe should have been like, could we do this for De'Aaron Fox instead? And like maybe Indiana says no at that point. Like, you can understand, like, look how good Sabonis has been. Like, you at least traded for, like, a really good dude who gives you an identity and has, like, a very winnable, scalable skill set. I don't know if LeVert, with what he does, is, like, a scalable player to, like, the highest levels of where the Cavs want to go. And, like, that's just the reality of it. And I'm curious to see what happens with him. And I know he's been through a lot of people in Indiana know that. Like, he's had, like, a lot of injuries, that the health scare as well. I'm curious to see how this unfolds with him, but I do kind of wonder if the Cavs would take a mulligan on this one if they could. Breakfast ball.
I think they would. Like, maybe I'm overhyping Andrew Nembhard, but like right now, if I was running the Pacers, I would not trade Andrew Nembhard for Caris LeVert. Like, period. Like that's how quickly this has turned for the Pacers to me. Well, the last time these two teams played, Caris LeVert looked like an MVP candidate, so maybe we'll look really stupid by the end of the night. Do you remember that in Indy?
I do.
He was unbelievable for the last 5 minutes of that game.
He was unbelievable. Like, this year, he was like insane against Boston. Like he had 41 in the Garden and was like amazing. And then he like, he's only had like a couple. Like, they've been recent, but like he's only had like a couple good games since and got hurt. And it's just like a very Caris LeVert thing to happen.
So maybe he'll have another stick it to him kind of game against the Pacers. I think this is a tough matchup for the Pacers in general. I think the Cavs will win, but I'm very excited to watch this one because this is the No Wings Bowl, as I will call it. We have to give it a sponsor, like all these stupid college bowls. It's the Pop-Tarts No Wings Bowl tonight between the Pacers and the Cavs. I had Pop-Tarts today.
Wow, like real adult move there, Tony, having Pop-Tarts. I'm going to shame you.
I actually, you know what? I got to brag since we're 38 minutes into this.
Yeah, that's fine.
I got it from a vending machine in my apartment building, and it gave me 2. It was a good day.
What a win for you. I do respect that. What's like a restaurant that serves like chicken but doesn't serve wings? The KFC No Wings Bowl.
Oh, yeah, that's much better. Pop-Tarts is not that good.
I mean, look, if they spend the money, it's fine. If the check clears, like we make it work,
If I was going to Cleveland for this game, we'd get KFC after the game. No, it would be a requirement.
I know we would not. Tony, number one, you will be. You need to come for a game, or I need to come to and 2. We will not be in a KFC. If you come to Cleveland, we will go to better places than Kentucky Fried Chicken. I hope
everybody that made it this far enjoyed 45 seconds of Pop-Tart and chicken wing.
Nick Gangstead, I'm so sorry that if this is the episode.
Monday on Locked On Pacers, we'll be talking about whatever happened in this Cavs game, as well as Pacers Knicks Sunday. Can the Pacers finally win 2 in a row for the first time in a while? Can they beat the top 6 teams in the East this weekend? What happened in those games? That's coming on Locked On Pacers. And Chris, what can people expect from you coming soon?
We've got Cavs Mavs coming on Saturday after Cavs Pacers Friday, and in the coming, I think end of next week as we get closer to December 25th, Christmas, we're gonna do a 2-parter Cavs Christmas gift, just giving out some gifts. Myself, my co-host Evan Damerl, producer Jake Stevens, special guest. We're all going to wear Santa hats and give out some gifts to the Cavs who need them. Are we all going to give them wings? Probably. That's probably all we're going to give. It's just a bunch of wings.
I always laugh at those because in my head I'm like, I made every player 8 feet tall. That is my accomplished goal.
I gave them Victor Wembanyama.
Yeah. Congrats to the Pacers. Now have 15 Wembanyamas and no longer need to rush to the bottom.
They have 1 Tyrese Haliburton and 14 Victor Wembanyamas, and then 2 Scoot Hendersons on 2-way deals.
That's the dream roster of NBA Twitter. They sim the entire season and go 1-81, and then they get that roster the following.
It's just actually like 15 Kenrich Williams. Just real.
It's a very niche ending to this show. Thanks for listening on both ends and making either Locked On Pacers or Locked On Cavs your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank y'all for listening. Have a good one. We'll see you soon.